Hi everyone, I am Paras Chopra, founder of Nintee. I am with Dr. Abby Phillips, a specialist in hepatology and liver transplant medicine. He's popularly known as the liver doc. You can see at the back of his screen. He's very active on Twitter regarding debunking various health claims, talking about what's good for health and not. And today we both wanted to talk about a project we did together where we spent almost $10,000, about 8 lakh rupees, to get 36 protein brands in India tested for toxicity. And the preliminary results, which are still not peer reviewed, and we can talk about the process of peer review in this podcast. But the preliminary results have been out. We'll link to those results in this podcast notes. But in this podcast, I want to discuss with Abby Phillips why we did it, what was our methodology, what did we end up finding, and we'll also take up some of the questions that came up during the process. Different people had different questions. So, yeah, welcome, Liver Doc.
Thank you, Paras. I think this is such an important topic that I don't think anybody has done this topic to the extent that you have planned it, and I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. So I wanted to kickstart by talking about the context, like why did we do this in the first place? We can talk about our individual motivations. My motivation was pretty simple. I came from the place of consuming protein powders every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, and having not a lot of idea about what I was consuming. I think on the internet I had read that sometimes there can be toxicity in proteins, some elements that are not supposed to be there. And I also read that for supplements, the rigor of quality check is not high. So I was pretty terrified by this lack of knowledge, and that's when I thought of why not get a number of protein powders tested. So that was my motivation. Can you talk about what was your motivation to get involved in the project?
So mine was purely on that specific aspect about the mystery in these protein powders that you spoke about right now, because I've seen the other end of the spectrum where people, I mean, young males who start off nutritional supplements, they come in with either severe liver injuries or an adverse event related to consuming these protein and dietary supplements. And I mean, there is a lot of data published in medical literature that speaks about how nutritional supplements, especially herbal and dietary supplements, and also protein supplements, have been one of the most important upcoming causes for liver injury, liver failure, and liver transplantation in the West. And not many people have actually done what you have done. A project like this where things are transparent. So even for me, when I diagnose a patient with a protein supplement induced liver injury or an adverse event, I don't actually know what in that protein caused it. You know, there are, like you said, multiple elements which are not disclosed, or there is some mislabeling, and we all know that these things exist, but we don't know the quantification or the qualitative part of all that mystery behind protein supplements. So when you reached out on Twitter regarding committing yourself to funding this project, which I really thought, this is such an important public health aspect too, not just with our own separate interest, but for the whole public, this makes a big difference. So this is what motivated me to go into this project.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my motivation was also that, like they say, information is free. If I end up benefiting from the project, so many other people can end up benefiting as well. So,
Exactly. Yes.
yeah. So, before we get into more questions, I think let's establish some basics for people who probably are just starting to think about protein powders. So, can you talk about what is a protein powder? Who is it for? And generally, people talk about protein powder for weight loss, weight gain. So, who should take it, and what are these protein powders in the first place?
Yeah, I think this is something very important because a lot of people are moving into using supplements on a daily basis. Some of them require it, some of them don't require it. Some of them feel that taking a protein supplement can actually improve their health overall. So there are these unclear notions among the community about whom should take, when, why, things like that. So ideally, a protein supplement or a protein powder is an add-on only in people who require that additional supplementation. So, for example, if somebody is apparently healthy without any chronic diseases, has a proper balanced diet, has mild moderate activity, that person does not need a protein powder because
Okay.
he's getting all that protein from his diet. So the suggestion by most of the nutritional societies is that the required protein intake should be obtained from natural food sources, and protein supplementation should be resorted to only if sufficient protein is not available in the normal diet. So the target that we keep is somewhere around 0.8 grams per kilograms per day of protein. And this is just protein. It's not plant protein or milk protein or animal protein. It's just overall protein intake should be this much per day. So if somebody cannot target that, then we advise for protein powder supplementation. And it is not just for a specific group of patients. It's for healthy people also, because there are people who work out, athletes, people who do endurance training. There are people who have what we call as supra physiological conditions. I mean, in the sense, like, for example, lactation or pregnancy. Or the elderly who are frail, who cannot take the right amount of protein in the diet because maybe they have loss of appetite or things like that. So they are the ones who require supplementation. So if somebody is apparently healthy, I don't think we should promote supplementation. It is recommended for people who actually require it.
Got it. So in my case, I'm a vegetarian, and it was pretty hard for me. And I also had started lifting weights. So in that context,
Yeah,
it
so that
became
makes
very hard
sense.
for me to really even get point 0.8 figure.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So because you need that additional supplementation, because it's not easy for you to supplement all of that. I mean, derive all of that protein just from the diet, which means you'll have to eat more frequently, maybe increase protein portions more just to meet your additional training requirements.
Right.
So that way it is justified.
Right.
And regarding the protein for weight loss and protein for weight gain, so even that's a pretty dicey area. For example, if we look at the studies which have been conducted on specific groups of people, where they looked at supplementing protein to look at weight loss. So they showed that when protein supplementation was just given to a group of people, and they had no calorie restriction, overall, but just protein supplementation and cutting down on other square meals, it did not actually make them lose weight. But when there was actual calorie restriction, meaningful calorie restriction, that actually led to weight loss. So it was not the protein that was helping them lose weight. That was just like maybe it improved their satiety,
Yeah.
reduce that, yeah, increase the
That's
satiety. So
yeah.
protein increases satiety and you eat lesser because of that. So that way you lose weight. And for weight gain, without proper training, endurance exercises, strength training, or you don't actually gain weight just by consuming protein. And this is very important because a lot of people think that just by consuming a supplement they're going to gain weight, especially protein supplement, not the other supplements where there is a lot of carbs and all that, but pure protein supplements. Without a proper exercise regimen along with that supplementation, there is not going to be meaningful weight gain.
Yeah.
So yeah, and this is also required in specific groups of people, right? Not for a common person who's doing common activities and things like that.
Yeah, I also think the notion of weight gain is a little bit misleading. People should target muscle gain, and not
Exactly.
necessarily weight gain. Nobody wants more fat cells or fat to be expanded, and the muscle gain does not happen unless you're doing resistance training, lifting weights.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So this particular study that they have done, and they actually did it in 2018, where they showed that the weight gain was actually because of muscle bulking. It was not
Right.
because of, yeah.
Right.
So that was one important aspect.
Yeah, so just to be clear, so just so that I understand it well, you're recommending that protein intake protein supplementation should not be a default thing. If you're, and likely if you have a balanced diet, you are able to get enough protein from the
Yes.
diet. That's what I've also read in multiple cases, that um, zero point 0.8 grams per kg of weight
Yes.
as a threshold, as a guideline for protein, can be had from balanced meal. But if you're training, let's say you're lifting weights, that's when you require more protein, because you're sort of putting strain on your body, and the muscles are getting broken down when you're lifting weights, and you need extra protein just to build up what is getting broken in your body, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And that improves endurance, that improves effort tolerance, and all of this happens with protein supplementation during training. So
Yeah.
that is one important aspect of supplementation in athletes and sports persons, or those who want to hit the gym and
Yeah. Although, I
work
mean,
out.
I want to just double click on the point you made around satiety. That's been my experience as well. If I take a protein shake, it just fills me up. And that is likely the pathway to people eating less and losing weight ultimately. Um
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. This is one important aspect where you can use proteins to replace your meals.
yeah.
You can take a protein shake, a well prepared, healthy protein shake, or a blended protein shake that you can make at home. You can use that and improve your satiety. That
Yeah.
that that helps you cut down on calories also.
Yeah, I think I was reading some hypothesis. There is a hypothesis where people have proposed that the body has a, like, out of all the sort of macronutrients, the body has a craving for proteins. Once body gets a sufficient amount of protein, then that satiety automatically reduces. So if in
Yeah.
a meal you end up taking proteins, I don't know how much of it is proven, not proven, but it sort of matches my personal experience that if I take protein shake first, I'm just so much less hungry later, to versus if I'm maybe eating some carbs, then the hunger simply just doesn't die down that easily.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it happens if you have a carb-rich meal. You actually uh, feel hungry faster, and there is I mean, a lot of people have actually experienced it. If you eat a lot of sugary stuff, you feel like you want to eat more because you don't feel full. But with proteins, you are controlled in what you eat because
Yeah,
you feel full much faster.
I think it's also related to the insulin spike, where protein has a much smaller insulin spike versus
It
carbs.
does. It
So
does. Yes. Yes.
probably even for diabetics, there is some benefit in exploring incorporating maybe more protein into their diet, if not from, say, supplements, but naturally.
Yes, I mean, this is what we even advise diabetes people. I mean, especially in my practice, I deal with two groups in the sense that most of these patients have chronic liver disease where they need definite protein supplementation, and a lot of them have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease related cirrhosis, which means they are either obese or they are having diabetes. And for them, protein supplementation actually helps improve their meal timings. You space it out in small meals, give protein rich snacks at bedtime. The glucose spike, the insulin spikes, the glucose control, all of it actually improves when you increase protein in diet.
Got it. So I want to talk about side effects. Are there any side effects of protein supplements?
I mean, side effect wise, I think we have to talk about two things. One is direct side effects or direct toxicity, and second is indirect. So the direct toxicity can actually be because of a component within the protein supplements. So we have different types of protein supplements, right? So we have a purely whey based. We have blended. So for example, they mix different types of whey. So we have whey concentrate, hydrosolate, different types of whey mixed together. Or you can actually have whey plus pea plus soy plus. They mix all these proteins together, and some of them actually have herbals in it. They add minerals, they add other dietary supplements into it. So there are some components which can directly harm the liver or kidneys and cause adverse events. For example, some of the herbal supplements are well known to promote liver injury. For example, there was a particular protein supplement known as Oxylite Pro. in the US, which was associated with a string of a series of severe liver injuries, some of them even leading to fatality.
Oh,
And ultimately, they found out that they actually added something known as egeline. So egeline is naturally occurring compound in bale fruit. So when people eat bale fruit during summers, it actually has something known as egeline, and the protein supplement which led to these liver injuries contained synthetic egeline, and in very high doses, which led to liver injury in most of the consumers. And this product was actually taken off the shelves by the US FDA. So we have direct toxicity because of added components. The proteins per se, pure proteins, be it bee protein, soy protein, whey protein, egg protein, casein, beef protein, collagen. I mean, direct proteins per se, they don't cause toxicity to the liver or kidneys. Second is the indirect toxicity. So indirect toxicities come with poor manufacturing practices. So they might be having contaminants or adulterants in it during the manufacturing process. For example, there might be some industrial solvents or some chemical. Yeah. So for example, we have identified benzene derivatives and industrial solvent derivatives like methanol and terpenes. All these things within the protein supplements that can indirectly harm the liver because they have been part of the contamination process, or there are adulterants. For example, a very important aspect is these protein supplements which are promoted for weight gain, mass gainers. They
mhm.
call it as mass gainers. So they add a lot of anabolic steroids in it, something known as hydroxy beta butyrate. These are chemical agents, even though they are generally considered safe. But sometimes in the protein supplements, their quantities and regulation is not so good, and the amount in the protein supplements can be harmful. So
Right.
anabolic steroid related liver injuries are quite common in people who consume proteins for mass gain. So these are the ways by which we can have side effects from protein supplements. Otherwise, if it's from a well-made, good manufacturing practices following known company, uh, I don't think protein supplements do harm
Okay.
if you take them reasonably.
So if it is sort of like, say, pure protein, then it's likely not to harm. It's the extra stuff that's added to protein powders
Yes.
that ends up
Yes.
harming. So my question is, again, it's also in the context of why we did this research. Why is nobody really testing it? What's the state of um, quality check that's happening for these supplements, both in India and outside India? Why did we even
Yeah.
need to spend so much of time and money doing what we did?
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult question to actually answer comparatively from other regions versus India, because see, even in the US, this is not something that is actively regulated by the US FDA. They just do vigilance on it. So they look at good manufacturing practices. They look at all the reports as per their standards. There'll be a 10 or 18 pointer questionnaire that they have to check the boxes for, checking of heavy metals, checking of contaminants, adulterants, and things like that. So once that is done and the papers are in order, they just clear it. So they don't actually want to directly regulate it. And even in India, we don't regulate it. The FSSAI actually looks at the documentation, and if those boxes are ticked off, and I don't think they do an extensive analysis like we did.
Deal.
Yes, it's more or less self-declaration, and also one aspect is that I think there is a site inspection where they actually go physically verify if the instruments and equipments and the raw sources are all properly done. But even then, the lot of these raw sources that they use to prepare these protein supplements are not fully regulated or evaluated all the time. And this is the reason why a lot of the idea about safety in protein supplementation remains opaque. So
Mhm.
we don't have an FSSAI report attached with the product that we buy. It's
Yeah.
just a seal. It says that FSSAI has seen it and it's fine. But when you actually do it, like we did it directly, we see that there are so many other things that we needed to know about. For example, even in our study, in the analysis that we did, we identified a few brands which had fungal contamination, even
Mm.
though some of them were within limits. But I would still want a protein supplement where there is no fungal contamination, because there are brands where there is absolutely no contamination at all. So I want standards to be kept at that level for every company, so that people are safe in buying whatever they want to buy.
Yeah. By the way, I mean, I don't even know what standards are for protein supplements, and it should be absolutely zero fungal contaminants, right? So I'm really
Yeah, I
surprised
mean,
to hear that.
depending on the sources that they utilize as raw materials, some of them they cut some slack to these manufacturers because there will be some inadvertent contamination in that. For example, if you look at turmeric, so when you source turmeric generally the root absorbs a lot of lead. It has very high affinity for lead in the soil. So it invariably absorbs that. So you cannot actually completely make it lead free.
Yeah, but
So
common person doesn't know this, and I would rather
yeah,
have a protein powder not with turmeric than with turmeric if this is the issue.
I mean that is the whole point of not using additives in a protein powder. So that makes it much more safer.
Got it. So can you talk about the approach we took for testing this? I know we tested about 36 brands. So how did we pick them, and what was the approach? And I mean, it's largely you who planned all that, and that's why I'm asking this question. So talk
Yeah.
about how did you really plan out this project?
So the with the 36 numbers is basically arbitrary because what we did was we initially chalked out a general plan where we wanted to analyze pure whey blends, then whey and herbal blend, pure plant-based, and vegan type of protein. So this was our general idea. And what we did second was to look at brands that we use nationally. I mean, in India, Indian brands and international brands that most of the Indians use. And that was why we looked at local brands versus national and multinational brands. So that was the second tier. And the third was to buy it from authorized sellers, properly made and sold from authorized sellers. So based on these, when we ultimately sampled from all of this, we came to that number 36. So initially we did not figure out we want to do 36. Ultimately we found out that we are doing 36 based on these because it was well balanced. So we had whey, we had blends, we had herbal, we had vegan, we had pure plant. So we had everything sampled properly from the Indian consumer websites and authorized sellers, and that was the first step that we did to
Yeah.
get the project moving. And we don't think there was any bias because this was very clearly thought of and methodically planned. We did miss out on certain very famous international brands, but we thought we would not include them because not many use it because they are very expensive. And these are the common ones that we could find out was very hot selling.
Yeah.
And that is why we choose them.
And obviously, I think there was always a constraint of a budget also. We couldn't keep on adding brands.
Yeah, I know, I know. I mean,
I mean,
if we had the option, we would have done 120
yeah,
brands
the
for
most
all of them.
most common I think comment I got was, why did you not include XYZ? And
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
everyone has a favorite brand, and actually that comes from a place of curiosity. And I think there is an opportunity for. I mean, it's hard to trust brand's own claim, but there is obviously an opportunity to systemize what we did for, let's say, 36 brands to a much
Yeah.
larger set. Because if someone is consuming something every single day, there's got to be so many questions. And in fact, even after proteins, some of the questions I started getting, do this for vegetable oils, because people have
I
concern
know.
for vegetable
Yeah, I
oils.
mean, somebody actually messaged me saying, do this for baby food.
Yeah.
Different types of baby foods.
Yeah, yeah. So we sampled brands from various perspectives: international, domestic, vegan, non-vegan, way, and we ended up at a list of 36 brands, right? Then,
Yep.
can you talk about how did we decide what to actually test? What aspects did we end up testing? And also the process where you actually did blinding, removed the labels before sending out for testing. Why did you do that? Maybe describe a little bit about the scientific uh,
Yeah.
process
Okay.
of going about this
Um,
testing.
so when we do, I mean, I have been analyzing a lot of products since the last 4 5 years, and I understood that it's important that we blind the samples because
What is what does
somebody.
blinding mean? I think lots
Sure.
of
So
people may not
blinding
know that.
means that I purchase all the 36 proteins and it comes to the office, and somebody else takes the whole stuff. They remove all the labels but before removing, they will make sure that they number those. So this it's something like coding. So there'll be A1 or A2. They code the product formulations one by one, remove all the labels, and on the labels they put the code again, and then keep it aside. And the all the products are completely packed and covered in other plain wrappers with only the code showing, and given to another person, so that that person has no idea what these products are, and he makes a list of these codes, and prepares a chart and sends it to the lab. So the whole opening happens in the lab. So we don't open the products. So the opening happens under sterile conditions by a lab personnel who will actually just mention that code and then start the analysis process. I'll be discussing what all we analyze and how we did that. And once all the analysis process is done and the reports are ready, they will just mention all that reports near to the coding, that is A1 or A2 or whatever. And this is then sent to the person who packed and sent stuff to the lab. He will see that everything is in order, and he will give me the final report with the on the coded samples. Then the person who actually removed the labels and coded it, I will ask him to give the sample codes which he had corresponded to me. Only then I will know that this particular muscle blaze was A3, or optimum nutrition was C4. So then only I'll realize that these are the protein supplements and these are the reports corresponding to that. So this blinding is important, so that if somebody who's actually checking it, or somebody who's actually transferring it to the lab is taking a particular protein, or has some stakeholding in some of the protein bands, it might be that you can have a bias there,
Right.
and yeah, there might be some reporting issues. Anything can happen. So we do. It might be very minuscule, but we don't want even that to happen. That is why we do blinding, to make sure that the process is clean. And what we did was we analyzed we did all the analysis of protein, heavy metals, fungal toxins, pesticide residue, everything as per industry standards, which is done across the world. So we did the Geldal method for identifying proteins. We looked at the HPLC method for identifying fungal toxins. We did the gas chromatography and liquid chromatography, mass spectroscopy for pesticide residues. We did the inductively coupled photometry for on mass spectroscopy for the heavy metals, and all standard. So we did heavy metal
So we did
profiling. We
we
did
did pesticides, heavy metals, protein
yeah,
content.
protein content, fungal toxins, synthetic and anabolic steroid presence, and a complete gas chromatography profiling, just to identify if there is some inorganic material that we did not miss.
Okay. Obviously, I don't think we can go into details about what these techniques
Yeah,
are
yeah,
and how they
yeah.
work.
But these are standards.
But
Everybody will
the generally, like at a high level picture, these are standard ways of detecting what's inside a particular substance. So that
yes.
substance can be baby powder, baby food, oils, or protein supplements. We're able to find out what is it made of, right?
Yes.
Got it. So, yeah, so 36 brands, we tested so many things. Should we talk about what were the highlights? And highlights mean maybe some of the false or inaccurate claims that brands have. Let's say brands that claim to have X% protein but actually have Y%.
Yeah, so I think in this aspect, I think the most important part is protein content. So what they advertise and what we receive, that is most important, because you buy protein for that content. So what we found out was that there was a lot of brands which advertised proteins as high, but we got it as very low as per the standard measures. And out of this, I think most important was big muscles. So big muscles, they advertised a protein, labeled protein content was 81%, but the amount we identified was only close to 20%.
Oh,
So that's like a 60% difference there.
wow.
And that was in one of the vegan proteins. And the second one was again by big muscles. It was known as protein whey, a protein whey, where they advertised as 76.5%, and we detected only 26%.
Okay.
So that's cheating, if you
That's
ask me,
massive. Yeah,
because
that's cheating.
yeah,
That's but
ultimately we are.
what is the rest of the percentage made of? What do they add? What do they adulterate it with generally?
So there is something known as amino spiking. where what they do is that is just to reduce costs in manufacturing so that you can overcharge the customer. So their cost of making the protein, maybe imagine it's 10 rupees and they will charge the customer 100 rupees. So that's like 10 times more profit that they can get out of it. So what they do is they use minimal amount of full protein in that, be it whey or soy or pea, whatever. And the additional protein, they bulk it up using amino acids and very cheap quality amino acids like arginine. And so when you ultimately test for proteins, it will, look at the protein content, not as per standards. It will show that it has high proteins in it.
Okay.
But when you apply the industry standards, you can actually see that the protein percentage is much lesser.
Got
So
it.
amino spiking is intentionally done. It is never unintentional. It is done to increase the profits from the manufacturer's side.
Got it.
And
Just
I think that is what happened with all of these
right.
low substandard protein companies that we analyzed.
So just to break it down for people to understand, proteins are a chain of amino acids. So if it's a whey protein, it will be a number of amino acids linked to each other, different amino acids. There are 20 amino acids, and we need a variety of them. And what you are saying is that generally companies can end up simply adding the singular units amino acids, maybe even same amino acid arginine, and
Yeah.
use very little of the complete protein, which is what they're
Yeah.
advertising. So it is literally cheating.
Yeah. So that's happened with some companies, and very interestingly, certain companies actually had label protein lesser than what we detected. So that was fantastic. So this Nitrotech whey had label protein of 65%, but we identified 76% in that. So that's 10% bonus for us. Whoever buys that.
But why would that happen? Is it? I mean, but that doesn't actually give me confidence. It actually says,
I think that would be batch to batch difference. So if I check another batch from the same company on the same product, I would find something else. So I don't think these. I think these are mostly batch variations that we see with most of these
yeah, but
proteins.
in one batch it's at high side, it might be in another batch it is on the lower side. And I mean, for really good
Probably.
companies, my benchmark would be that they've nailed down the process so much that what they put on the label is what's inside the box.
Exactly.
I
In
would
a better
not
word.
want any
Yes.
surprises, even on the positive sides, frankly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there is both people claiming to have less protein than they have, and the other side. What else did we find any toxins, metals, fungicides?
So we besides the protein, the most important part is to look at detection of pesticides and fungal toxins because a lot of them actually come from the sources. So if the raw sources are not good, you will end up with having a lot of contaminants. So what we identified was that aflatoxin. Aflatoxin is it's a major fungal toxin which is liver toxic. It's also a carcinogen. It can promote cancer development. And we found out that 5 out of the 36 proteins that we checked contained aflatoxin. And this was in Forever Life product, that is an ultra soy protein. Optimum Nutrition's whey isolate had little bit of detectable aflatoxin. British Biological's B protein, which is a standard protein people normally take, had aflatoxin, and Nutrilite by Amway also had it. Now, I want to make a point here that aflatoxins were mostly detected from plant protein sources. Not the whey and the dairy sources. So I think it has something to do with the sourcing of these plant proteins, the major sources that might be contaminated during transport or storage, and this is completely unintentional. It is not an intentional thing that happens. Aflatoxin toxicity.
Right?
I
Is
mean
it
contamination.
is it this toxin? Does it come during transportation, as you're saying, or does also the pea plant
Yeah,
absorb it and
it
it?
does not come during processing. That is 100%. It can come during transportation and storage. Or if the source has not been carefully selected, the raw source is already contaminated highly, then this can happen during processing. You can have minute contaminations in the end product.
But is
But the yeah.
what sort of contamination is it? Is it like an herbicide that is sprayed
Yeah,
on
so this
plant?
is a direct fungal toxin. It's a toxin produced by a fungus,
Oh,
aflatoxin. Yeah, so it's a toxin from a particular fungal species that we call as aflatoxin. So the test that we did directly detects that toxin. It
Okay.
does not detect the fungal species, but it directly detects the toxin.
So likely it's come during storage because of
Possibly,
fungus.
yes. That is the most common. Um, I mean, discussion also that people. So I mean, the answer that people give about fungal contamination.
Okay. And did we find any metals, heavy metals or toxic?
Yeah, so heavy metals was quite surprising because every product that we analyzed had copper in it. So
Okay.
copper is usually added because it is a micro mineral that is required for cell functioning and antioxidant properties. I mean, you can actually quote a lot of biochemical, basic level molecular stuff based on copper. But interesting was that some of them actually had very high levels of copper, which is not good. So people can end up with copper toxicity if they're consuming such products over a longer period of time. And copper toxicity is not good because it can harm the liver, it can harm the blood, it can cause anemia, it can cause problems at the neurological level, at the brain level, the nerve level, and things like that. So one of these products that is, I think, by the Forever Life product known as Ultra Soy Protein had very high levels of copper that
Okay.
we found out. It was somewhere around 31 milligrams per kilograms. When the standard companies usually had somewhere around 1 or less than 1 milligram
Oh,
per kilogram.
30 times
It was
higher.
quite high. It's quite high. And some of them had lead contamination, which is something that I'm completely against. You cannot have lead contamination because even the WHO says that any exposure to lead is a health hazard. Any exposure. They don't even talk about limits of exposure. And some of the products that had lead was, and most of these were again plant-based products. For example, Himalayan Organics had lead contamination. Oriflame's blended protein had lead contamination. And one of the protein powders by Patanjali, I mean, they use a lot of herbs. Even that had lead contamination. And I would not, I'll be very unhappy if there is lead contamination because that is one of the most commonest
Yeah.
heavy metal toxins that we know about.
And it's very
So
dangerous. I mean, I was
it's
watching a
quite dangerous.
documentary on
Yes.
the whole lead in petrol and how it led to a lot of
Yeah,
issues
exactly.
in US before it was banned.
Exactly, and very few of them even contained arsenic, traces of arsenic. Even then, those were the same companies which had mostly plant-based proteins, and they had arsenic contamination in that. Even arsenic, I would be very wary because it's such a toxin that you would get to know the adverse events at a very later stage. So, and that's too late. And even lead is like that. When you start developing bad symptoms and you are at a very particular position where a lot of complications have already set in, that is when you detect them. So it's not good to have these in the protein powders.
Got it. Do you have any idea where would these metals come from in the protein? Is it via plants, via manufacturing, supply?
So the plants is definitely one of the major sources because they absorb it from the soil. Second is definitely from the equipments that they use. So some of them actually, these factories may be commonly used for other manufacturing also. So for example, they might be making some other drugs, or they might be making some other chemicals or something. I mean, it's not purely for protein making. So these equipments might be shared between companies, and that way it can be contamination from the equipment themselves.
Hmm.
So these are the ways. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to add lead or arsenic to
Yeah,
these supplements. These are unintentional contamination, but they should be careful about it.
got it. So, I mean, one question that after all this keeps popping in the head is what's the best protein? Everyone asks that. I don't even know if the question is right, but what would, based on the research,
So,
you end up recommending?
so I mean, from the batch that we have analyzed, because I'm sure there are a lot of good companies out there, and we have just analyzed a cross section of specific protein brands and and specific batches. We have not actually analyzed all the batches in on this specific portfolio. So in that sense, we are not able to actually tell you exactly what the best protein is. But from the analysis that we have done, looking at heavy metal contamination, an ideal or adequate advertised protein content which matches with the label, absence of pesticides residues, toxin residues. I would think that the best whey protein on the expensive scale would be Ultimate Nutrition One Science. And the medium range, I'm calling it as medium range because the amount of protein that was detected was slightly lesser, was in NutraBox, but it was a very clean company. So they it did not have much contamination, no toxins, and but only the protein content advertised was slightly more than what we actually found out. And from the plant-based protein for vegans, I think Origin was the best company, and they actually put my photograph and name and all on their website without my permission, which I think they have taken it down now. Origin did that, but their supplement was quite clean. I mean, what we analyzed, and I would always not look at our analysis as the benchmark. I hope to build on this more at some point, and then we'll have a larger portfolio of what is actually happening, and maybe even look at batch wise so that we have a better idea. But from what we did now, I think these are the best proteins that we identified.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is an opportunity there if there's an entrepreneur in e-commerce wanting to build a business
Definitely.
around regularly tested supplements with from a neutral party point of view. I think someone should go ahead and at least build it.
Yeah.
Um, it is very hard to trust, like the brands claim, there has to be a neutral party to be able to analyze it.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, I'm pretty much sure that I can't trust any of these commercial advertisements that they do. I mean, I'm like 100% sure about it now. I mean, when it comes to food or drugs or whatever, I mean, it's like every man for himself, you know. It's
yeah,
it's it's not
that's
easy.
Yeah, I wanted to also pick up a few questions from Twitter that came up.
Okay.
So let's just read them. I'll read them and you can respond. So Aradhana is asking, how safe is it to consume whey or plant-based protein for women planning for pregnancy and who are already pregnant? She says a lot of gynecologists prescribe Protein X or Ensure. So what do you have to say about that?
See, I mean, planning for pregnancy, I don't think there is any requirement for protein supplementation unless and until it is going to be a high risk pregnancy with the uh, the woman having some chronic disease that requires additional protein supplementation diet. And somebody who's already pregnant, definitely it is a supra physiological condition where you need more of not just proteins but proteins, carbs, and everything. And if you cannot actually take that in diet, for example, I mean, for in the number of people, women, pregnant women that I see very commonly, they can get it from diet. No, they don't usually use protein supplements, but there are some women who develop severe nausea, vomiting during the first trimester, where they cannot actually eat as much as we want them to. They can use these protein supplements very safely. And all of these are safe in pregnancy. Soy, pea, whey, they are all safe in pregnancy. A point about Protein X and Ensure, we did analyze them, and they actually are not really protein supplements. They are just supplements with a lot of carbs also. They have a lot of added sugar, and the protein content is very less compared to actual whey protein supplement brands that we have checked in our study. And I would not suggest such off the shelf. They are very famous and I mean very commonly prescribed because they are slightly cheaper also to buy. But they are not definitely not good sources of protein, if you ask me, because we have seen much better brands in our analysis when it
I
comes
think
to protein content.
the lesson there is just because it says protein powder doesn't mean it's a protein
Exactly.
powder.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
check the percentage of protein. How much protein
Yes.
are you getting from one scoop is an extremely important
Yeah. And
criteria.
how much additional carbs they are adding, how much
Yeah.
added sugars are there. All of these are important.
It has to be minimal. It has to be almost all protein that you're taking in a scoop and not the carbs. You're anyway getting
Yes.
carbs from rice, roti, etc. So why would you
Yeah.
want that from your supplement? I want to take another question and then we can move towards the closing of this conversation. So Vivek is asking, few of my colleagues eat just protein bars for lunch, and this has been their routine for 6 months now. Is this good for health? They believe eating just protein bar helps in reducing weight. I know we didn't talk about protein bars, but
Yeah.
you have
But I
to.
think this is a good question because there is actually a study on it,
Okay.
which is why this is very interesting to answer. So there was a study where they analyzed a group of people who consumed high protein bars and followed them up over a course of many months, compared to another group who were on normal diet and another group who were on high fat snacks. What they had found out was that the people who were on protein bars had very good satiety, lesser consumption of calories, and much spaced out meals, which helped them lose weight. So this is there. This is true. I mean, a good protein bar. We have not analyzed or discussed protein bars, but still a good protein bar with very high content of protein, with good quality additives. For example, the form of fibers or nuts or fruits. It is actually a good idea to replace a meal so that it helps you in cutting down calories and losing weight. So this is possible.
Right. Although in my experience, I think I used to eat protein bars, but I not eating them anymore because of all the additives they end up adding.
Yeah, a
It
lot
is
of additives.
highly processed food item, and I recall I think there is this sweetener maltose or something else, which
Yeah.
really disrupts the digestive process.
And there are these protein bars which have no additives at all, natural protein bars. It feels like chewing on cardboard. You
Yeah.
know, you just can't eat them.
Either
Impossible.
you, I mean, either you can have taste or health. Very hard to find things that meet both the criteria. Maybe just one more question from one of the people on Twitter. Harshvardhan is asking, how would one know if the supplement is working?
See, I think we can look at it two ways. One is a subjective feeling, and one is an objective. So, subjective feeling is that somebody who's taking a protein supplement and also doing lifestyle changes along with it will definitely feel that his or her effort tolerance has improved, capacity to work out has improved, sleep has improved, overall quality of life and well-being has improved. I mean, these are subjective. We cannot measure them. Second is to go objective. So objectively, we can actually assess body composition analysis, where you can look at your body fat fraction, muscle fraction, bone densities, calcium stores, phosphorus, and from a baseline and after consuming the supplement, you can actually objectively assess how it has improved in you. So it is possible, but I'm not sure everybody would actually do that, because it's going to be like it's like a protocol which not many can adhere to, and it is expensive because a body composition analysis it's an expensive test to do, and you have to draw bloods for other things and all that. But I think a good benchmark is to uh, make sure that you can identify subjectively if you feel that your muscles are bulking, that your activity, for example, before I started working out or initially consuming protein, I don't consume protein powders now because I'm able to take this in diet. But initially, when I used to skip a lot of meals because of my heavy hospital work, I used to consume protein powders, and I never used to work out. But once I started doing aerobic activity along with protein supplementation, I was actually able to walk all the way, all the steps in my hospital for my rounds. Initially, I used to take the elevator and
Right.
go, but now I can just walk up. That is possible now, and that is a subjective way that I know that this is helping me and being useful for me.
Got it. Got it. So yeah, let's try to sort of wrap up the conversation since we are at the end of our time. But wanted to sort of before we do that, talk about what's the next step for this research. I know you were talking about you're trying to get it published in a journal. Can you talk about it? How you're thinking
Yes.
from here?
Yeah. So what we do now is that we have all these results with us. What we'll do is we'll do a, review of literature or whatever has been published until now in literature regarding protein supplementation and protein supplements and their analysis. So we have a lot of data on protein supplement related studies and protein supplements causing harm, but we don't have any data on complete analytical work upon so many protein brands. So we'll just review the literature on that aspect and see uh, how our work is different from what is already published. So we'll have a paper which will have a section known as introduction, where we write about whatever has been published now and how ours is different and what we are doing with our project. Then we go into methodology regarding how we did all of this work, and then we go into results and discuss whatever we have discussed. And then the discussion part, we will look at analysis done on protein supplements in the literature, which is already there, and compare with ours. So we'll see if there is something that is matching, or we'll see something that is novel, new in our study, and then we'll discuss all of that. So this makes it a whole paper.
And
And yeah.
sorry, when is it expected to come out?
Yeah, so I have started working on the paper now because we have a lot of tables to prepare, huge number of supplementary sections on this, because we have to give out all the raw data also for the peer reviewers to look into. And once we submit this will go into peer review, which will take anywhere between 3 to 6 months easy, depending on the journal. And they might reject it. Then we'll have to submit to another journal. And this keeps happening until somebody says that, you have to revise it and then resubmit, and we'll accept it. So that revision process again will take another 1 to 2 months.
Okay.
And finally, once they accept it, it will become a published literature in that particular journal that we plan to submit. So I was looking at a mega journal, which means a journal that will take up all kinds of scientific publications, for example, scientific reports or PLOS One, something like that. I was trying to look at some journal like that, which a lot of people will actually read, and we'll have a good exposure on our work on that. So this is how the peer review process goes.
Right, but it could take, let's say, 6 months to 1 year.
Yeah, definitely,
Never know.
definitely.
It must take a lot.
Yeah, and some journals will actually love it, the work, and they rapidly review it, and they'll put it into publication within 3 to 6 months also. So we can hope that something like that happens with this.
Great, great. So cool. Just the last very thing. I mean, my new startup Nintee, it's all about pushing people to do better in life. So wanted to ask you, if someone has to start taking, say, protein powders, how do you recommend them to sort of really start out? Should they just start with one scoop, half scoop, increase it gradually? What should be their approach if they've never taken any supplement and they want to start doing it?
So my honest advice would be that they first meet with a clinical nutritionist. Not just somebody who works in a gym or has a website or a web page. No, not like that. A proper clinical nutritionist who can actually assess their body composition analysis and recommend the extra amount of proteins that they want to take or they have to take. So once that assessment is done, then the person can decide what kind of sources of proteins that they want to take. For example, somebody would just want whey only. Somebody might be lactose intolerant, won't be able to take whey. So they can take whey isolate or a plant-based protein. Somebody might have very less muscle mass and a lot of fat mass. So for them, they would require additional creatine supplementation along with the whole protein supplementation to improve muscle mass. So all of this depends on your actual scientific and methodological analysis at the baseline. So I would suggest a person look at them initially, somebody who's registered and legit clinical nutritionist, and then move on to the next step of looking at how much of protein they would require and the sources that they are comfortable with.
Great.
So
Yeah,
So this is the way that it should be done.
Got it. Yeah. So if there's any actionable advice, it's really to figure out whether you need extra protein in the first place or not, and do that by talking to a certified clinical nutritionist. So anyone who's listening to this, don't just go out and rush and buy a protein powder just because you've heard a 1 hour conversation on it. Maybe make it a point to reach out to someone who can really advise you from a clinical and scientific perspective. Maybe get a body composition test done and see what targets you have to meet when it comes to your protein intake. This is fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Abby Phillips. It's wonderful to have you on this podcast, and hopefully we'll continue finding more and more things to talk about and research when it comes to supplements and similar aspects.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paras, and it was a pleasure talking to you. I did not know that we have already covered almost an hour.
Yeah,
It was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you for that, and this is such an important topic, and I hope people find benefit out of our conversation.
great. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye bye.
Thank you. You too. Take care. Bye.